The persistent rain in Frankfurt could not wash away the sins of the past. It only turned the ruinous dust into a gray, thick sludge that clung to everything. It was October 1957, and the city looked like a broken jaw being braced back together with gold. The so-called economic miracle was roaring across West Germany. The sounds of drills and construction cranes drowned out the haunting silence of the dead. But for Inspector Lukas Vogt, that silence was always more piercing than any noise. Standing on the edge of a muddy foundation pit in the Gallus district, with his trench coat collar turned up against the biting wind, looking down at what the new prosperity had just dug up. To the cynical police officers of the criminal division, construction accidents were just an excuse to escape the heat of the ruins. That was an old, gaunt man, wearing a ragged police uniform reeking of stale alcohol and smoke. The initial assessment was made lazily and predictably. A drunk fell into the flooded basement of the Emmerich Tower and broke his neck on the concrete. It was a rather convenient tragedy for the city, just looking at the corpse that was just fished up. But Vogt never believes that chance plays a role in tragic accidents like this. He is a person who always looks at the dark side of life, a sharp gaze witnessing the dead being silenced in the days of murky prestige. Occupying the best supplies provides glory. He knew that even as a dead body, the man still had to bear the weight of his choices. Vogt climbed deep into the pit despite the wet soil clinging to his shoes. The sharp cold of the underground air chilled the back of his neck. Hot torches were arranged to light up the slimy surface. With sharp eyes and full of doubt, Vogt scanned the corpse. He ignored the rotten smell rising from the muddy puddle surrounding the left hand of the middle-aged man. The victim's neck twisted awkwardly. The bruises on the neck were not caused by falling inside. In the man's torn pocket, he groped for a chaotic memory. It was not simply a drowning. In the soaked inner pocket, a leather wallet still held the intact history. Vogt knew exactly the letters engraved on that badge. That was the haunting image, the impossible-to-erase mark of the Waffen SS force. 12 years ago, this man was one of the heavy economists, an idealized symbol of terror. Today, he is just a broken shell. Being increasingly high-ranking in wartime makes him a dead man in peacetime, but strictly speaking, his miserable shape merely suppresses the glory. The position that actually erased the trace of the dead. Without money, without papers, just with a strange pile of copper coins. And a piece of paper soaked in water. Vogt carefully picked it up, shielding it from the rainwater. It is a handwritten letter officially from the past, a suicide note aimed at saving face for war refugees. The ink smeared to the point that the letters could barely be read. However, the tragic sentences were still raging about the Federal War Victims Relief Act. Discussion related to people like this, members of a criminal organization, deserves to be sheltered by the state, like ordinary veterans or not. This man clearly tried to cling to something, to have a reason to argue that he was coerced, was a victim of the times, just to be abandoned by history. The letter was dated barely 3 days ago. That is conclusive evidence for a soul's despair, a testament that he tried to hold on to something before getting crushed. But the thing that Vogt finds in the corpse's lining makes him change the story from tragic to horrific. His finger touches a hard object sewn deep into the coat, a hidden pocket made of thick velvet. He takes out a metal key that has rusted and a folded piece of paper hiding the list of names and names. Names impossible to understand if looking casually, but they stand out in the business sector of Frankfurt. Those trying to build fame and wealth from the ashes of the war. Rightly labeled as a list, makes Vogt rub his temples again. Karl von Emmerich, the owner of the construction site building this skyscraper. The man currently building a house for the era chose his own downfall. Vogt looked up at the black sky. Dim light from the yellow street lamps spread over the lifeless concrete frame. This is not an accident caused by drunkenness. The faint mark on the victim's neck proves that this man fought. The scratch list from the concrete wall proves he tried to stand. Falling usually doesn't struggle. He was eliminated because of a heavy burden. The final struggle ended with these signatures. It indicates a transfer from the market to a dark reunion. He put everything back into the beautiful black bag. Vogt stands up, back stiff. He needs a cigarette burning amidst the stagnant water. He climbs out of the pit, facing the construction manager standing uneasily above. The name is Lukas Vogt, and he just found the first crack. The rusted key found in the coat hides a riddle. It could be a bank safe key, or perhaps the locker key of those who returned. Beside the box in the bar, Lukas Vogt watched the subtle interactions of high society, a powerful, arguably ominous arranged order. It is a notebook of the last wars and a torn page recording transactions related to the charity fund for refugees from the war prison. But names associated with contribution amounts match the list in the dead man's rusty wallet. Pictures haunting the heavy conscience and impossible to deny. Those are images taken in Latin America, Syria, and West Africa. Images of people officially confirmed dead faces appearing living comfortably among palm plantations. The dead didn't sell only silence. He was the middleman smuggling money and papers for criminals fleeing overseas. And the deepest line remaining until today, sandwiched between pages, is Karl von Emmerich, the man currently running a clean business from the rotten pillar of the post-war era. Vogt strikes a match in the dark alley, realizing this brother is lighting up the staggering arrogance hidden behind the stone walls of the city. Brother War Fund entered a tavern in Sachsenhausen, a familiar meeting point for former officers wishing to discuss salaries and fake legs. Vogt steps in not with the status of a police officer, but wearing the Wehrmacht cloak, clutching the collar against the old chill and the sunken face. Without smoke swirling and dense connections, words like brother are also violent, empty words about things arranged because reason is where it speaks. He sits in a hidden corner, sipping warm beer and looking deep into the room, dark men quietly huddled around a Bavarian copper stove. But he also notices something else, real fear. This is not a gathering place for miserable people. It is the secondary government active in the shadows. Vogt observes quiet figures disappearing through a secret door. He quietly listens to strange mutterings about unrecognizable obligations. They talk about parts of the epic things police are strangers to and values hidden just behind the very hatred leading them there. The organization mentioned internally as the Association for Mutual Aid creates a network answering private interests in a cohesive and discreet manner. They are creating fear of the new communist threat from the East so that looking back is not a matter of morality, but a Bolshevik story necessary for the West. Vogt realizes a terrifying truth hiding behind the pungent cigar smoke that chokes the breath. It is not simply allowing the snake to shed its skin and transform. The bubble isn't inside the coat behind the ghost door. It is the return of the roots reaching down into the place, not daring to reconsider the past. Karl von Emmerich enters. In the loose collar of a vest, tailored perfectly in gleaming leather shoes, an arrogant distinctness in the midst of gray mediocrity. However, the arrogance they reserve for him is absolute. Emmerich does not look like a man keeping a secret, but like a judge approving a destiny. He doesn't discuss the past or regrets. Vogt hears Emmerich giving orders encompassing supply and establishment with a cold command. He doesn't talk about the past. He talks about the future of Europe, a discipline that once failed and should be tightened and put on a new coat. Vogt feels a nausea mixed with adrenaline. He is not just looking for a killer, but finding a criminal army regaining power. The man who died at the construction site was killed because he wanted money. He intended to blackmail the association for his survival. When Emmerich turned to leave, his eyes swept across the bar and lingered momentarily on the dark corner where Vogt sat cold and quiet. That is the look of a predator evaluating a threat. Vogt doesn't dodge. He knows fleeing is crossing a dangerous line. He is not purely investigating a case. He is declaring war against the power silently struggling to change the history of ruins. When stepping back into the rainy night, the neon sign of a corner shop flickers, turning the light into the color of blood on the wet pavement. A haunting warning that the dark force buried deep under the prosperity of the economic miracle will not suffer silently much longer. The investigation led Lukas Vogt back to his rented room on the second floor. The wind shook the window frames as if panting the saddest symphony of a stifled city. He climbed the stairs with a stiff, heavy breath coming from his lungs. Removing the damp coat, a vague sense of inescapable death rose up. But Vogt quietly placed the heavy steel pistol on the cluttered work desk, just like Karl von Emmerich. Using heavy abilities must recover from unfulfilled things from 1945. Vogt broke the heavy lock. Inside, the black book comes to one of the encryptions of the skulls. That was not a ledger of finance. It is a scary dossier, a detailed map of the system of rat lines, allowing the escape of the brilliant bones of the Third Reich. So Vogt turns each page, the horror actually appearing more and more clearly. The project under the soil is not destroyed by bombs. The profile reveals clearly that the humanitarian aid employee of the Das Reich newspaper, the most touching evidence proving Karl von Emmerich was the destination of the massacre. There is a silence in the raid in 1944. Americans and Soviets pursued the Tungus Eagle number for decades. Not seeking protection or hiding refugees entering foreign countries through Frankfurt, the trademark of this house, builds anti-communist pillars. Powerful figures unknowingly pushed the backbone, or perhaps kept silent, and supported it to maintain Emmerich. This book forces Emmerich into crime. War crimes are proof of life. Living well is thanks to betrayal. Vogt breathes heavily as the jacket falls, but silence flies instead of heavy rain. He is not alone. Vogt pulled out the cocked gun, preparing his mind to face the person hired, or the killer Emmerich was waiting for in the dark. Changing into clothes, holding the cigarette as wet as death, Vogt saw the glowing red ember standard of the police. 3 officers surrounded him. The signal light lit up in the bright corridor. In a horrifying moment, Vogt felt light thinking about the peace coming. But hope was instantly extinguished by the cold discipline of the riot police. They did not move like regular investigators. They moved like a special squad. The commanding officer, a man Vogt recognized from the police station, shouted, "Freeze!" Not allowed to argue legally. The simple order handed over and came out from a place for others deeper than the ribs. Vogt knows he was betrayed. The police force, the only place he trusted with his heart, now aimed guns ready to invade. Spontaneously acting. This is the mark in the list of the Black Book. The comrades were signed SS Lightning Bolts on the police star. That never changes ideology. The war changed names and uniforms. Vogt spun around, punching straight into the commanding officer's jaw. But the blow was blocked by the absolute brutality of the remaining number. Blows from rifle butts rained down on him. Not trying to subdue, meant to punish. Upon kneeling, tasting blood and the dusty smell of the public housing, a sweeping kick hit squarely into the ribs. They took the briefcase. An officer bent down with contempt. He took the lighter and set fire to the corners of the Black Book. The fire illuminated the room. The long shadows danced wildly, like joyfully toasting ghosts. They silently left, leaving him in pain, broken bones, and breathing. With a message imprinted in pain, in the lonely war, justice has almost no leverage against the strategy. When the police car screeched away, leaving the abandoned shadow, Vogt truly realized the loneliness. He was not fighting a criminal, he was fighting the house itself. Lucas Vogt wakes up not in a clean hospital bed, but in a dim detention room smelling of disinfectant and old urine, the smell of fate's cold oppression of his body. The body aches as if strapped tight with rusty barbed wire ribs, breathing painfully, but the headache is the only remorse remaining. Fear pushed full of pain into existence upon looking at himself detained is the silence of the unfeeling concrete walls. He was released 2 hours later without an apology, with a notice of disciplinary suspension and a cold look. The official report, fighting with the relevant officer, lacking mental control. The investigation at the construction site happened suicide and destroyed the guarantee regarding the elevator. A perfectly confusing lie, ignoring the comrades who beat him, also proving the police force's deep corruption in the salary. When recovering and requesting a meeting with the police chief, he only received silence and the slamming sound ending all hope. He is solely positioned, more clearly actually, and sadly, he cannot defeat the sophisticated organization deleting the suffering files. Wandering through the streets of Frankfurt like a ghost, Vogt feels the separation between the lavish city and the torn viscera going through. Not the new economic miracle in words, but inside Vogt another sprout grew quiet but stabbing him painfully. He still has the connection belonging to belief, seeking a final desperate gamble from a crime specialized in a way else, but relying on secrecy to avoid the eyes filling the grief of existence, suddenly turning into rumors about Jewish freedom, not confirmed. Information passed very separately at the market, asking where the Mutual Aid Society just needed a replacement urgently for the other death. They see hiring the obedient veteran, understanding the elegance of the country as important in managing logistics for the upcoming party. The party took place at the Romerberg Square mansion. Vogt, now wearing a waiter's uniform, keeping the cold hatred in his chest. Vogt stands among the silver trays and clinking glasses, seeing Karl von Emmerich appear on the high balcony like a holy guest. His name regarding Tuscany is introduced with prestige and flowers, calling the Waffen SS story a misinterpreted history. The crowd nodded, clapping. They did not want to hear about the brutal truth, but felt safe because of the strong man and the security he promised. Between the exquisite white wine glasses, Vogt recognized the victims, the vague fear mixed with the warm noise. He sneaked into a wine cellar adjacent to the backyard, calling the grief deeper than the stomach, staggering the career and stepping to the end. The Black Book came to the intruder, and Frankfurt chose for him the stranger dressed technically heavily prepared. When he adjusted the aim on the barrel of the Luger pistol, breathing smoke dust, and heard the laughter of the girl being brought in, facing a step of death on the wet ground, just a slight gap containing fatigue and a dark heart feeling the specialty. The absurdity speaking obviously for both the appearance, the drawing of fear, and the absolute despair about the dark crimes. He placed the barrel on the cross-shaped target mark of the Red Cross, regretting that it did not explode, but the cold silence as tough as failure. There is no need for legal intervention or justice, just walking, calmly waiting to undo mistakes in final seconds. The choice should recognize that phantom blow, he received the law that could be failed, but the truth remained. He doesn't need judgment or forgiveness, just squeezing the trigger with the monster behind him, giving back the price. Vogt bowed his head, backing away, receiving a coldness, another flame lighting up, and the gunshot rang out. The lobby of the Frankfurter Hof Hotel is splendid with the sparkling light of crystal chandeliers covering all appearances and floral scents. It is a celebration of the Mutual Aid Society, a convergence of fragrant perfume and expensive cigar smoke, where the past is hidden after civilized smiles. Hundreds of elite characters of the new world of West Germany, tycoons, politicians, and private advisors, sat around the table praising Karl von Emmerich stepping onto the stage. He stood under the light, raising a glass to wish for prosperity and brotherly love across borders, a warm voice penetrating hearts like the hypnosis spell. Security was tightened very strictly so that people outside could not enter, but they did not care about the plain-faced waiter carrying money amidst the lobby. Lucas Vogt did not scream from the back door. The ghostly shadow of the past had nothing left to lose when death truly hunted him. The things he kept about the suffocating constraint fully overcome by the protection. Vogt moved amidst the tables like an ink stain spreading on a white tablecloth. The applause rang loudly, replacing the rough insults. Emmerich slightly smiled, a rigid smile deeper than the usual performance. Vogt stood right under the stage leg. He did not draw a gun because drawing a gun would be quickly shot and fall into oblivion. Instead, he threw the Iron Cross medal, the item found on the widow of the middle-aged man, onto the podium. The metal collided with the wood, creating a chilling sound interrupting the speech. In a split second, the sound that everyone in the room understood. Vogt turned to the audience, shouting loudly. He spoke about the endless graves, about the mission of Das Reich, discarding the pretense and beautiful appearance. He pointed at Emmerich, not as a hero, but a criminal of the bloody regimen, stealing life, swapping destiny and wealth. The person held by the salary flow being sealed by the mouth, Emmerich in the excitement by drinking cheap champagne, product from the bodies of prisoners. The Mutual Aid Society is not the love of comrades, Vogt said, but a safe haven for those stealing sacrifices. Not waiting for the security guard from the guest to act, the guests, looking at Emmerich, saw each other darkly whispering unfinished secrets. Emmerich's confidence disappeared when he understood this was not a challenge, being a dead face separating the barrier of sustaining respect. The chaos shook the glass layer. Vogt dragged Emmerich off the podium. Nobody stopped looking at the horror spreading in the throat. He hugged the throat through the clean hotel lobby, through the cold rain door, lying on the wet ground listening to the bastard keep begging in the voice. Touching the water-filled crack, Vogt smiled, sensing a sweet drop of rain mixed into the saltiness, causing numbness to be able to burn. Slowly standing up, Vogt lit a cigarette in the rain, feeling a cold peace. He knew he had sown the seeds of doubt into the foundation of this empire. It might take many years, but eventually the concrete will crack. Vogt turned up his collar, stepping into the darkness, becoming the lonely night watchman of a city that refused to sleep peacefully.